Welcome to part 2 of the Weather API tutorial. We're back on the documentation page, just so we can look a little bit more into what else we can do. It tells us we provide the following data through our API: real-time weather, forecast, historical weather, marine and tide data, astronomy, air quality data, right? There's a lot here, a lot more here that we didn't look at before. So if we go down, we read about the different methods. So we use the current.json, but there's also forecast.json, search, history alerts, marine, future, and so on. And we can read about the request parameters. We use the query parameter, this Q. This is required. Last time, if you recall, it was the city name that we had to use. But there are other examples, right? So aside from city name, there's latitude, longitude. You could put in a zip code. You could put in the IP address, for example. There's another parameter called days. So you can, if you're using the forecast API method, we can tell how many days of forecast that we need, right? For history and future API, you're going to need a date output, right? It tells you the format it needs to be in, so on and so forth. So you should definitely go to this page and read through this a little bit more to understand what some of your options are and what the parameters will look like for these different options, right? There are location objects that are returned. So we can read a little bit more about also what that means, okay? We get information about the weather alerts, air quality data, and I've taken us back to our VS Code. I put some imports at the top. I have this is my API key. Once again, you'll use the same one that you've used before, just yours, not mine. And this is the just base URL. Then here's an example of what we had used before when we were using current, and say with the city of Louisville. So if we want, we can go ahead and we can test it out. Response equals request.get, and let's just go ahead and use this string here. And I'm gonna response.status code, and we'll see what we get. So I'm gonna run them all from the top here. I didn't mean to put in the parentheses there. Let's try again. Okay, 200. That looks good. We know everything is working. Last time we took a look at what current was, right, by doing a couple of things. So first, say we did this and we're still in this current one. We have data equals response.json. And then we could just take a look at the data itself. So this shows us all these different things, right? We had pulled a lot of things from current. There's a lot here: latitude, longitude, wind direction, so on and so forth. And then if we wanted to see just what was in current, we could do that, right? Just a long list. You could see the scrollable element and see everything. Heat index, cloud. So that's a refresher of what we did last time. And we used a lot of this current to kind of create our get weather function, so that we could print some current information about weather of different cities, and maybe even multiple cities at once. We saved it into a data frame. So this time, let's do something new. Let's think about the forecast. Maybe we don't want the current weather. We want the forecast. So we can create a new forecast URL. I'm going to call it that, forecast URL. It's going to be another F string. And it starts with that base URL that we saved. And then it is going to be forecast.json, right? We saw this, I got this directly from the website. And then key equals, and we'll use my API key. And then we have to give it the query. So and Q equals, we'll give it the city. Right now that city is saved as Louisville. And remember the forecast, we had to give it that other days parameter. It needs to know how long of a forecast. So days equals, let's do 3. So let's start there. This is our new forecast URL. So we'll do a forecast response. And we'll do the same thing. So request.get forecast URL, and we'll just check that status code as well, just to make sure. Oh, I don't know how to spell forecast. Here we go. Let's try again. 200. Okay, excellent. So that works. What we can do is we'll do forecast data, do the response dot JSON, and let's just take a look at that at first. Again, I should learn how to spell. And then let's look at forecast data. So here's the forecast data. So we can scroll through. There's a lot of information. But I was able to look up and know that the first place to look is forecast data and then forecast. So let's look at that. So this breaks it down a little bit, and then it's forecast day. We can see inside here, that has a lot of information. We can go into that as well. Forecast data, forecast day, right? So this has the date, and then all of this forecast information for each particular day. So we'll call this, we're just going to call this forecast. So forecast equals this forecast data just for that day. And recall, we chose 3 days here, right? This is the forecast for 3 different days. If we want to look at that in a different way, we can do this. We can create a place to save it, right? We can call this a forecast summary. Or maybe we'll call it forecast 3 days summary. So we know exactly what's going on here. We'll make that an empty list. So for day in forecast, remember forecast is what we made here. For day in forecast, we're going to append this list we've made, forecast 3 days summary dot append. We'll make this F string, right? So this is what we want it to look like. We're going to have the day, date. Okay, so this actually needs to be in brackets here. This is a variable. Okay, that's the date. So first it's going to list the date, and then we're going to tell it the high. So inside brackets again, we're going to call from the day we want the maximum temperature. That's the high, right? So it's max temp. We'll do it in degrees Fahrenheit. And then we will do day. I'm going to find the condition. And recall before when we were looking at conditions, we just want the text of the condition. So let's see if that runs. Yep, no problem. Let's take a look at the forecast 3 day summary. Awesome. We have the date, we have the high in degrees Fahrenheit, and we have the condition. We could also add the low if we wanted, right? So if we wanted, instead of just high, we could add a comma here and put low, and then do a similar thing. So we'd have day, day, and then we will do min temp Fahrenheit. So we'll run these again. High of 87.6, low of 61.9. Make sure we add that F here. Excellent. And if you're wondering, how did I find this? How did I decide to do day, date, min temp, max temp? And really, the answer is that it just took a little bit of time reading what some of these things are. Okay, so whenever you're using a new API, you'll read through the documentation carefully, and you'll do some exploring here. And it takes a while, but you'll figure it out. I'm just kind of saving us the time in this case, but I would start to read and say, okay, when I first look in here, it has a date, right? But then day, this big one, has this dictionary with all of this stuff. And I know that these are the things, like this is what I'm looking for, right? There's astronomy, there's hour. So I'm looking for the things that have their own dictionaries in front of them as my first step. But back to where we are with our forecast. What if we don't want the date to look like this? We want it to look a different way, maybe. We can use the datetime library. You'll notice I imported it at the top. That's because we just wanted to do something kind of fun and interesting to play around with datetime. So let's try a different way to do this forecast summary. So let's do forecast 3-day summary. We're gonna start over here and we'll say 4-day in forecast. First, we create this date object. So we can create a date object equals datetime dot strip time here. Day, date. Right, so this is telling it what to grab, and this is what it's grabbing. Remember this first part, day, we go into the day and grab the date, and this is the date, okay? And then we're telling it what format it's in. So inside a string, we will put the format that we see here. And what we see is the year, and in these, it's just kind of what it looks like. It's like a %y, %m, %d. Year, month, day. That's what it looks like. It's separated by dashes. We're putting in the same format that we see. And now we want to format the date a little bit differently. So we're going to call it formatted date. It equals the date object dot, it's like this string f time, right? Like string f time. This was kind of this like strp time. This is strf time. And we're going to give it a different format. So now it says %a, comma, %b, space, %, little hashtag, and a d. And we need this to all be in the same string for it to work. And now we're going to append this forecast summary. And instead of having this day date, we're going to be using the formatted date. So we'll start with that. So we just have here formatted date. And then the rest of it we can keep the same. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in. And maybe I'm going to separate this by like a slash instead. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just print out that new list. So now you can see what happened. So this was in this year, month, day format. And now it has these letters, and this is indicating the actual name, right? So instead of showing the year and then the month and the date, we're starting with the day of the week, the day of the month, and then the date itself, which is a number, right? So Friday, August 29th. High, 87.6. Low, 61.9. Sunny. So after having seen this walkthrough, I'd like to encourage you to try another one, perhaps astronomy, to try to get the sunrise and sunset, or the moon phase. And I'll give you a little hint here. So we'll make the astronomy URL, and I'll help you with that. So that's the F string, and remember it starts with the base URL. And then after our base URL, we just have astronomy.json. We'll do our key equals API key. And remember, we have to have the query, and query equals, we'll do city. And this one, we need to tell it for when. So and date time equals, we'll just call this, we're going to make a separate variable for this also. We're going to say today, and I'll show you how to do that. If we wanted to always get like the current day, we can make today. We can also use something called a timestamp. So it's in the pandas library, timestamp, and we can get now. And then we tell it how we want this formatted. And we will do Y, year, month, day. Because this is what they need. This is the format that it asks for. Right, so you would get the response the same way using this URL. And then you need to look through the API and try to figure out then, what do you need? Like from what dictionaries are you grabbing things? See if you can figure out how to put in the sunrise time, the sunset time, and maybe even the moon phase. Using those two or any other features of the weather API, I'd like you to write a function. We'll call it get city data. And it's going to take some parameters, right? City and API key. And inside this function, you should be able to get the current weather, right? We've already done that. Get the current weather. We should be able to get a forecast. You can choose the number of days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever. And then get some astronomical data. And then we'll just say, get anything else you want as a challenge. All right, so after you get all of that information, you should build a forecast summary, like build a summary for the city. And save that summary into a dictionary. And after you've done that, I'd like you to use this function that you've made in order to easily build a data frame that has the city data from various cities and then save it into a CSV file. Just as a practice of this whole process, you've gathered data, you've written a function to help you gather specific data, you've put it into a pandas data frame from a dictionary format, and then you've saved it into an external file so that you could look back on it later. If you have any questions, please reach out on the Slack channel. You can put it in the classroom channel or reach out to me directly, and have fun.